Previously on the Talk Better Project. Well, then President Barack Obama was like, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, you don't get to come to my birthday party. And then Mitch McConnell was all, it's not like I even wanted to. And yet this is around the same time that Senator McConnell first decided to repeal Obamacare. Hi internets, I'm Ross. Welcome back to the Talk Better Project, where I try to explain some of the conversations about topics in the news. Is the ACA a massively expensive, gross overreach of federal authority? Or is it a touch of grace, finally advancing our civilization to a kinder, gentler epoch? Well, by the end of this video, you'll know. Hopefully? Actually, the whole point of the Talk Better Project is to encourage people to have better conversations with people they disagree with. We break down a topic into these 5 parts. Last week, I explained some of the politics surrounding Obamacare, and this week, I'm going to talk about the facts of the law itself. But I'm also going to try and show how even facts can feel political. Now, I say that because how we react to facts is usually based on our gut reactions, which become our politics. Say, for instance, I tell you that the ACA cost, I don't know, $1 trillion. What's your reaction? Do you immediately want to fight against it or for it? I'm not saying you shouldn't have that gut reaction, but notice it. I mean, come on, $1 trillion? What could cost $1 trillion? Just remember, in part 1 we talked about how Democrats hate freedom and Republicans hate people. No. We talked about how people from different backgrounds can see the same facts doing different things. And, speaking of facts, Obamacare, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, and the ACA are all different names for the same thing. They're all the same law. An act passed by Democrats, with no Republicans on board, and signed in 2010 by President Obama. But most of it actually wouldn't come into effect until 2014. What could possibly cost $1 trillion? The ACA. Most estimates put the budget around $938 billion. Yeah, nearly $1 million. But that's over 10 years. Also, depending on when you start measuring, it could be as high as $1.7 trillion. The cost of the ACA isn't really easy to explain. It changed a lot of systems within the federal government, it added a lot of money to state budgets, and it changed money that was given to businesses for offering insurance, among many other things. There are a lot of different ways to measure how much the ACA cost, how much money the new taxes raised, and how many years you should look at to decide how much it cost. It's probably not surprising that the cost of it is among the most confusing parts of the law. Politics? Follow the money. Lastly, why was the ACA even written? Well, it's actually a law about health insurance. The ACA got written because 50 million Americans had no health insurance. Keep that in mind, because it's super important and we're going to come back to it. The law went into force in 2014. By 2016, most estimates say the uninsured rate in America dropped by half, roughly 20 to 24 million. Now, first of all, I am not trying to be a replacement for a news agency. These are not all the facts you should ever know about the ACA. Please check the video description for links to much more information. But, like we talked about in part 1, people can see the same facts doing different things. And I think that's fine. I don't think there's a right way to interpret it all. That said, how you interpret them and talk about them is going to be based on your feelings about government responsibility. Sorry, I know that's a lot to just dump on you, but those are just the basics. If we're really going to look at how people feel differently about the ACA, we need to get into how the law actually works. Remember I said that the ACA was written because over 50 million Americans had no health insurance? Well, this might be the most important fact of all. Democrats and Republicans agree. Having that many uninsured Americans is a problem. It's not much of a party thing here. It's just obvious that between Americans dying unnecessarily and the big risk to the economy, 50 million uninsured Americans is not good. Everyone agrees it would be nice if everyone had cheap health insurance. But how? Do you incentivize and encourage people to get health insurance and companies lower their prices? Or do you make them? Well, Obamacare makes them, which is probably why it's a 7-year-old law that we're still fighting about. In order to accomplish its aims, the ACA was built like a 3-legged stool. Take out any one and the stool can't stay up. So what I want to do is explain each leg and then try to contextualize why that part of the law was written. Regulation. The biggest thing the ACA did was require insurance companies cover everyone. Before the ACA, insurance providers had a lot more ability to pick and choose whether or not they provided coverage to certain people, and what they charged. The basic idea of health insurance is simple enough. Medical care can be crazy expensive if you have to pay for it on your own. But not everyone is going to need medical care. So, private companies offer to charge you based on how likely they think it is that you'll need medical care, and pay for it if you do. It's a gamble. You may never need the medical care, but you end up paying only a fraction of what it ended up costing when you do. Obviously, health insurance sounds pretty good for people who think they might need medical care in the near future, and not so good for people who don't. And the opposite is true for the companies. They would love to just collect money from people who never need medical care. But what about people who will definitely need medical care? What about people diagnosed with a lifelong illness? At some point, they will definitely need medical care, and it'll definitely be expensive. Well, pre-ACA, the insurance companies could just turn them away completely. That left dozens of millions of Americans uninsured. No companies would take them. But the ACA told insurance companies that now there must be minimum levels of coverage for everyone, including those with pre-existing conditions. Well, that's expensive for insurance companies. Individual mandate tries to handle how expensive it is. ACA says that everyone needs to have insurance coverage, or get fined. Even, and especially, healthy people who are less likely to need care. Because see, if only people who need medical care get insurance, it becomes very expensive and could implode the system. So it only works when a lot of people, especially young and healthy people, are involved, helping to spread the risk around and lower the costs for everyone. That way, insurance companies, 1, don't go out of business, and 2, can lower prices for everyone. But insurance is expensive for people. Subsidies try to handle how expensive the mandate is. ACA gives money to people who can't afford it otherwise, so they can have coverage. This leg, combined with the mandate, gets everyone into the system. Young, old, healthy, and at risk. But let's rewind, because we missed a step. People with pre-existing conditions weren't receiving insurance coverage, but they were still receiving medical care. Because in America, anyone can go to an emergency room and receive care, even if they can't pay for it. But they still get charged. And what is a hospital to do if they charge a patient who can't pay and goes bankrupt? Raise prices to try to recoup the loss. So, insurance companies were not providing coverage to people with pre-existing conditions, but hospitals were still charging them for emergency care they would go bankrupt trying to pay for. And what do you think the leading cause of bankruptcies in America is? Medical bills. Also, much cheaper care that might have kept people out of the emergency room wasn't covered. So the system was already trying to absorb the cost anyway, but it wasn't ideal care, and it was expensive. Hence this decision to require everyone get coverage, and provide money to those unable to pay for it, including people with pre-existing conditions, hopefully helping them get less frequent, less expensive care. So there you have a very simplified explanation that's missing a lot of detail and nuance. Please check the description below for more resources. Now, I'm not defending the law or telling you that you should support it, but we should respect its complexity. If you're against the ACA, maybe try to remember. It's trying to provide a solution for huge medical bills the system was already struggling to absorb for people who were, many times, born with terminal, extremely expensive medical conditions. Maybe ask what alternatives there are for that. If you're in favor of the ACA, maybe try to remember. Those who are opposed usually feel that way because they perceive all of this as a massive overreach of federal authority. For them, the ends don't justify the means. Maybe you can ask why the government can't tell me what car or shoes to buy, but they can tell me what insurance to buy. Sorry this one ran so long, but I think the complexity deserves some time. Before we go, let me leave you with this. Having 50 million uninsured Americans in the richest country in human history is a problem. I think we can afford to live in a country where our neighbors don't die from curable illnesses. But doing that isn't a question of whether we have the money or power. It's a question of whether we can talk well with people we disagree with about who should wield that power and where we should get that money. Let's recap what we've learned. Republicans and Democrats somehow agree that everyone should have health insurance. It's just why and how to do that which causes headaches. The ACA is basically a leprechaun with a pot of gold sitting on a three-legged stool of regulation, individual mandate, and subsidies. And that pot of gold cost $1,000. But most easily forgotten is the real enemy here. Sickness, age, and death, who creep after all of humanity with a thirst that swallows eternity and a strength what must not be denied. Now that you know some basic facts about the ACA, next time we'll take a look at some of the history of healthcare legislation before getting into each party's political background in all of this. Thank you for putting up with me this far. I'm Ross. This is the Talk Better Project. I'm not trying to tell you what or how to think. I'm just trying to encourage people to have better conversations with people they might disagree with. Hate bad political conversations? You can help. Please consider going to Patreon and showing your support. Or like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Those all really help. Thanks. See you around. Next time on the Talk Better Project. It was Roman Emperor and General Marcus Aurelius who first wrote in 170 AD that all citizens should have state-subsidized access to CAT scans, MRIs, and X-rays. Most insurance plans haven't covered wooden teeth since President Washington, but they don't call the ACA revolutionary for nothing.